Welcome back to Money Matters and our discussion about business succession planning. So, Jason, we talked a little bit about what direction or who actually initiates the process to get the estate planning going. Do you ever see business owners say, hey, I need to get this done? Do they come to you, or does that discussion happen?
Yes, fortunately it happens every now and then. More often than not, it's suggested. Every now and then someone's getting old or they think they want to retire and move, and then they start thinking about it. But quite a bit, we have to bring up the suggestion because the right planning is way before they're thinking of retiring. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
The issue that you have is, let's say there are family members interested. Which one? Who do you leave out? How do you compensate for the one that doesn't go into the business? How do you make it sound fair? If the children are not in accord, it could be a very big battle, and I don't think anyone wants to die and leave a mess, or the legacy is that the children are in lawsuits, and we've seen very large lawsuits among siblings when it comes to picking over what's left of a business. Sometimes it's not any of the children at all. Sometimes it's an in-law. Someone marries someone, the husband or wife never really cared about the business, but the father and mother kind of say, boy, this guy's great, or this gal's great, she's doing a terrific job. They come up into the business, and now we have, almost an outsider, very involved in the business, very integral, but they get it. And from the parents' point of view, they're saying, this person gets it. But if you aren't careful, the person that's working there, whether it's an in-law or the son, if they have siblings, the children that aren't there and working, the one that's working hard, they start resenting the ones that are just getting a paycheck.
I know. I see that. I had a friend of mine who he owns a business. He's a great guy, and the owner, he was related to the owner, his uncle, and the guy became ill. And he ended up taking over the business, and it took him a while to get the money together. But there was a lot of, let's say, some dead wood there that was kind of tricky for him to get moving along. So it was hard. I think it's a tough situation, and you want to make sure that people are getting compensated for what they're doing.
Right. And what if the person you have to get rid of is your brother-in-law or a sister or a sister-in-law? It's very, very hard. I had a situation where the family had a very successful company. It was equivalent in size to some decent-sized public companies, privately held, and there were in-laws involved and sons involved, and they absolutely wanted everybody that didn't work there out. And the planning.
Because they knew, because it was sitting there. There was a patronage system going on.
Well, and plus, if you're doing a good job of running the business, you're creating a lot of value. And the one that's working in the business starts saying, well, who am I creating the value for? If you work at McDonald's, nobody resents the shareholders of McDonald's. They get their dividend when they get it, and the executives are well paid, and they harbor no ill will towards, passive shareholders. But when it's 10 people, and you're 1 out of 10 in this next generation, you're making the whole business work, and you can't collect your paycheck plus your dividends, but you're feeding 9 other people, doesn't last long.
I'm thinking, you said about time, how time's important. Time's important from both ends, for the person who's actually setting it up and he needs the time to do it, and also for the group that's coming in, whoever's going to. I have another client, they run this food business down in Virginia, and it was, again, the husband got sick.
Oh, yeah.
The wife had to take over the business. She had to go through all this training. It took her, it's a really miraculous success story, all things considered. And now she's doing a great job. She's running the business very well. But she had some time. Some people don't have that time.
Right.
And it would have been a situation too if there was no one to sell the business to. In that situation, she had time to get squared away and get the registration and get the training done.
To get it done, right? You should tell her to give me a call now, because eventually she may stop, because she has to think about what happened to her. But again, going back to your point there, that's interesting. We mentioned that too, and there's some pushback because it was so traumatic for her when she went through it. It's hard for her to, well, I don't want to think about, I had to go through this death and business transition, which was wrenching for her. Wrenching.
And now I have to go, now you're telling me I have to respond to it again, or I have to think about it again. It's very difficult to deal with that.
Well,
there's a lot of psychology in this business, I think. I hate to use that.
I know, because I'm not a psychologist,
right.
but you're absolutely right. There is a lot. I once had, it's not quite related, but I had a client that we had saved them millions of dollars in taxes on an estate because there was the way the corporations were held, we cleaned something up. And I had suggested you might want to consider making gifts to your children.
Correct.
And she said, I can't afford to do that, Jason. I mean, I just can't afford to do that. I said, okay. Well, a year later, we're just doing an estate review, and she said, well, I think I may want to talk to you about that gifting again. I said, well, why? She says, well, not only do I not spend my principal, I don't come close to spending my income. And it took her a year to get there, to realize that my advice was correct then. A year is not a big deal unless something had happened.
Right, but it could drag on.
It could drag on a long time. And the other important planning opportunity that gets missed is tax savings. If you die with a business that's worth, let's say we could say it's worth $10 million, after you take off, assuming there's only moderate planning, we can give away $2 million in most states. Maryland, they tax you on $1 million, starting at $1 million. But you can give away $2 million to anybody you want on death, estate tax free. Well, if you have a $10 million business, $2 million you give free, the $4 million you're giving to the $8 million go to the next generation. Guess what? You have to pay a $4 million tax bill. And if the only asset you have is that business, where's the money coming from?
It's got to get sold.
Right.
And they might be sold the way you want to when it becomes a fire sale.
Correct. Correct.
How do you value a business? How do you make that valuation? That's a tricky question too. People, you go to an owner, they say, well, we think you're worth this much, and they say, no, I'm not. How do you do that? Sometimes it's wildly on the upside and downside. So.
Right. And the IRS, well, if it's a market deal, it's usually, well, public stock, obviously it's public stock. A privately, closely held business, you get appraisers, and you hire accountants that are skilled in giving business valuations and appraisals. There are ranges. I once had a case, I never litigate, but we have kids that litigate. I once had a case where there was a guy on the stand testifying to the value of a business. Well, I saw that he was giving a course on appraisals at some college nearby, like a one-day seminar. I went to the course before the trial. I said, well, you say this, but based on what you said in your course, you could really be between 5 and 10, in a variation scale. So how'd you find that out? It was one of those types of moments. But
how funny is that?
It was something, and the idea is to get a valuation. Plus, let's say you have a business that has a very high upside potential. Why not move some of it out to the next generation before it has this magnitude of increase in value? It just gives you a very good opportunity to move some business and ownership away without giving up all the control. While it's at a lower value, it's out of your estate, it will never get taxed in your estate, and you involved your children.
And when you say this, I'm thinking about that 7 habits of highly successful people. And one of them is keep the end in mind, or begin with the end in mind. I mean, would you say that when they do the succession planning, is there a certain time when they should do it, or they should start right away? This should be part of their ongoing process as they're building their business.
If it's a very tiny business and you're just getting started and you're trying to see if you can make it, you need good business planning to help you make it. But while you're trying to make it, though of course some people might always think forever they're trying to make it, but within reason.
I believe me, I know.
So if they're just trying to make it, help them get started. Once they're past that though, and as a professional, when they've made it, even if they don't, that's when they have to start thinking about it. And that could be 20 years before it happens, or 2 years before it happens.
All right, very good. Why don't you hold right there? We'll be right back after this break. Please stay tuned.